Welcome back for another FME Fireside with Abley Digital Engineering. Myself, Gavin, Todd, Hamish. Today we're going to be talking about HTML, Hypertext Markup Language. Some of the stuff that we've done in our projects, some of the stuff we do personally, tips, tricks, suggestions. We're really looking forward to it.
So there are about 3 or 4 HTML transformers within FME. We've got the report generator, the layout, the extractor, and the HTML to the XHTML transformers. And it's a pretty small subset of transformers, but I know me personally, I've used standard text writers to write HTML and all that sort of stuff. But before we dive into sort of some of that more niche, sort of more advanced use cases, the HTML report generator, that's probably the one that most people have used. And I mean, you can do tables, graphs,
lines,
your own custom.
It basically builds an HTML report that can contain anything based on your data,
and the output goes in the exact what attribute that you need for the HTML writer too. It's just super quick how you can plug it in, drop down, select what data you want to push into it if it's a graph, let's say, and then write it out straight to HTML right there.
And it's something I've used the HTML report generator for, and probably jogging memory here, Todd, is dashboards with an FME server.
Yes.
That's one of the... So if you're not familiar with FME server and what dashboards are, essentially, in the most basic sense, it shows you how the FME server is performing. So your default ones are your engine runtime, the number of jobs run, failures, that sort of stuff. They all use the HTML report generator, and we've previously built other custom ones that might show
all the repositories and all the workspaces. Actually, we've got it now. So we've got a FME server auditor, which spits out one big file that contains all the information into something that can be used in
the thing that's essentially building all that is the report generator.
The separate thing to that, to make it more consumable in the web interface, is that report generator creating lots and lots of pages that can be consumed easily. In that scenario, the report generator does a great job of doing kind of basic things. One extra thing that we had to add in was some JavaScript to do table sorting.
I remember that.
So we included that in afterwards with our little bit of thing, just doing a replace. Yes, and that works a charm. So now we've got a whole bunch of it can be sorted by any column and all that sort of stuff.
That's what
report generator driving.
I think that
the guts.
You get the starting point using some of those pre-configured ones, and then I think as you get more advanced with some of your HTML functions and all the things that you're plugging in there, where there's JavaScript or CSS and whatnot, the custom HTML becomes a little bit handier in some cases.
Yes, I think that's right. The reporter is there for relatively simple,
straightforward stuff.
But saying that, it saves a lot of time. And just adding a little extra bit is not significant once it's all been structured out nicely for you. And
even just if you're not even wanting to put it out to a web page, just summarising your data and producing a result that just summarises all the information that you've got into a, sort of almost like a visual aggregator where you can begin to, instead of merging your features together, you can actually build something to see how it looks when it's all been combined.
That's a good point.
Well, actually, in a far-off case that I did a few years ago, one of the interesting things about Esri and a string field in Esri is that it's actually HTML. So you can create your HTML report and put it into a field, in a database and then bring that up
I've
as
seen
the table.
I've seen that before in other
Yes.
applications as well,
Yep.
where you can basically
And
create a pick where let's say you're making a web map and then you pick a feature and it opens up an HTML page, then you're just storing that within
that field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen that before as well.
And you say you did that a while ago, and I think I probably did similar things with ArcGIS Online, and then they moved and advanced, and you could actually start to do some of that things more natively now without those hacky approaches.
Yes.
So then outside of the creation of HTML, let's say you're pulling in HTML, then the extractor is what becomes quite helpful.
Yes.
I know that I not know, but
scratching?
I think it's what 6 or 7 years old. It's older than I would think, but it's still relatively new. Because
In terms of not well
I think
used.
that I vaguely remember when I first started using FME, or shortly thereafter, I had not trouble, but I don't think it existed yet. And then I do it, like you said, it's tricky because I always have to use the CSS selector help page to get the
figure out what you actually
what
want.
divs and all the IDs and stuff like
Nested
that.
things and yes.
But it is super helpful to get that list, and then you just pump your stuff through. And if you need to expose the list or use the list, whatever you're doing with the data, I find that HTML extractor quite helpful when you're reading web
I
pages.
can't remember what I last used it for, but I remember going, man, that made life easy.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, like you say, it's not something you use all the time, so you're always going in having to remember how the CSS selection works and going off to W3 schools and all that sort of stuff.
Link to that.
And but actually, when it was done, I was like, wow, that saved a gigantic amount of time if I was to approach it in any other different way.
I agree.
And especially for, I can't even remember what it was, but it was very structured but unstructured, the thing I was looking at, and it did a great job of getting what I needed.
Yep.
So, and then other times that I've used it, I wouldn't say I was, again, not caught out by it, but in terms of just getting that syntax right is basically the thing, and then you're set up and away it goes.
And the web page can change. It can change its content and the
definitely
the
like,
logic that you've implied. That
on a
you've built.
personal level. I'm not going to say I don't use it to collect statistics from sports websites, but I'm not going to say that I do. Anyways, but year after year they might upgrade their website, so then you have to change some things.
I know what I use it for.
Okay, is it going to be related to the stock market?
No. It is, so the Abley.com webpage, I do a whole bunch of monitoring across that. So, finding out if we've got any 404s in terms of HTTP status, and doing a whole bunch of other things.
Cool.
And making so all our emails are encrypted on there, so you can't scrape it.
It's hard to scrape it.
But there is a couple of situations where I'm looking for things that haven't, when it's been set up, have just been missed. And so the process that runs across our website every month has a whole bunch of HTML extractors pulling out certain information to make sure that what they're getting is all formatted correctly.
Cool.
So,
and so some of our more advanced tips and tricks, those types of things we could talk about. Yeah, use cases. One of the ones that I really enjoyed working on was a cross-section tool to show subsurface utilities, so underground utilities on a diagram, cross-section diagram. And it did take some thought around how I wanted to do this, or how we were going to do this as a team. And what we came up with was using HTML canvas to design the layout and then turn it into an image file that we could put into a PDF and print. And the HTML5 canvas was the first time that I really dealt with it, I think, was in this project. It was awesome. It was a lot of fun. Measuring out how wide the slot trench was going to be. They call them potholes. So how wide that's going to be. And then placing each pipe that was picked up via survey underneath it, applying the depth, and finding your distance, because what a HTML canvas does, basically you give it your X and Y coordinates in pixels, I believe pixels, and then I had to figure out the distance from the edge of the pothole, apply that as a equation of how far away it is, and then how many are in there, how far away from the edge, and all kinds of fun stuff. But more or less, you're just drawing a circle here, and then after it became more of a thing, I ended up elongating the ones that were running parallel with the slot trench, all using HTML5.
And all dynamic.
All dynamic. Apply the depth, distance across as a different diagram above it, because you can show the picture of where they are in the pipe, but then above that it tells the dimensions of how far across it is and how deep it is. Cool. But it was really slick, and I've actually done a little bit of playing around with HTML5 canvas on the side as well, putting a draw tool on there, so if it was a web page, you could make it even more dynamic, where people could go in and mark things up on the canvas and stuff like that.
You did a lot of that with just like attribute creators and attribute managers.
It's
all text-based.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's very text-based. It wasn't using the report generator, HTML creator to do the equation on per feature basis. And then after that, it would kick into like some statistics calculators or aggregators or whatever was needed to pull it all together.
Was FME able to then draw that internally within FME and convert it to an image?
Yes.
So it was able to render the HTML5.
Because it was on Windows, I was able to use the HTML to image hub transformer. There's one out there. It doesn't work on Linux. It might work on Linux. I haven't downloaded the program that it uses. So basically it calls a executable to convert it to image, and then I planted that into a PDF.
Yeah.
Because I was having trouble going HTML as a piece of PDF, and it just worked better that way.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the interesting things about that kind of process is it shows you that FME can do the whole thing. It's like the whole report kind of gets created.
Right.
You will have probably images.
That was only one component. But yeah, exactly. There was a table at the top that showed what the project was, which was HTML, I think, creating a table, and then an image of the slot trench, the diagram next to it, and then underneath another table, and it described each one of those, so they were numbered in the diagram, and then down below you had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, what it is, all the utility information related to it. So you're exactly right, and it is all within FME. It'll pump out the number of reports per slot trenches that are put in via the inputs, and spits it all out into those reports, a CAD file, and a GPS or a file geodatabase,
and I suppose
connecting all those things. And it was a requirement. Yeah. The reports were requirements from City.
And I suppose because it's a HTML file, you can style it all CSS. So if the client updates the branding guidelines, or it gets used for another client or whatnot, then you don't actually need to change your core fundamental structure. It's just this layering file on top.
Yep, exactly. And you can go in there and find where, you switch some things out within the translation, and then you can save it off as client B.
Yeah.
One of the other ones I was just thinking of in talking about that was actually not using HTML report generator, but I've used the XML templater before. So, and while that's not always the answer, and definitely not always the answer, sometimes it gives you some functionality that can actually help create your HTML page in the way you want it.
Oh, interesting.
And then change those tags
over
type
stuff.
Across it to give, because you've got the ability to do the sub.
Because HTML is a subset of the XML language, I think.
Yeah, I mean they're markup languages.
Yeah, they're both markup languages. Yeah.
That's I might try that sometime. That's pretty slick.
Yeah, nice. But it's pure HTML doesn't work well in the XML templater, but you can
use them together.
Use it together, the structure, and then refill that structure in with something different.
Cool.
Yep. Yeah, I've done a bit of advanced stuff with So we had a client over in Australia, and within their cadastral layout, they have very small sort of counties, I believe they're called, very small sort of administration areas. And we were doing a project, and they wanted a web map for every administration area, and all these web maps were ever so slightly different. So, you know, they'd only show the information for their area. And yes, you could have gone and done that manually. Probably would have done it manually if there was 2 or 3 of them. But I think we were talking about 30 or 40 of these administration areas. So, utilising some of the functionality of Esri's web app builder, where you could pass in custom configuration files, actually built an FME workbench to give a list of these administration areas as a spatial format, which would then go through and apply definition queries on the data, set the zoom extents, and then in addition to that, it also created a config file that was read by a sort of central landing page that, similar to your one taking a screenshot, took a separate screenshot of the default zoom, so you sort of got a thumbnail overview of the data you were going to be looking at before you clicked on it, and that was, I have a feeling it might even still be being used by this region, and that saved hours worth of work, because as soon as one thing changed, I didn't have to go and recreate these config files. I just had to update one master.
And the great thing is you have the dynamic nature for all of those things. Your CSS, your JavaScript, all the components of HTML, you can be mixing and matching whatever your needs are within FME. And we're talking about the HTML writer. I actually write all my HTML outputs with the text file writer. I mean,
and just change the extension.
It's
to
an
HTML.
old dog syndrome. You know, that's how I did it when I learned, and that's just what I do now.
Yeah, I usually do that as well.
Yeah.
But I must be younger, dog.
Oh, thank you for joining us again for another FME Fireside chat. We're the Abley Digital Engineering team. I'm Hamish, this is Todd, this is Gavin, and we'll catch you at the next one.